Hello, welcome back to Dark Tower YouTube, where we're taking a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. Welcome back, friends. This is a special bonus episode. Ash and I continuing our series on The Man in Black, also known as. We started this, it feels like years ago. I think it must have been months, and we never imagined that we would be on episode 7, I believe, which is a nice number to end on, considering the Dark Tower series. But here we are, wrapping up our series on The Man in Black. Today we're going to be covering who is the Man in Black in Book 7 of the Dark Tower series, The Dark Tower. If you have not listened to our other episodes, I would say you should listen to these in order, because we are kind of building up a case for different things here, and we're going through what did Stephen King say about the Man in Black, what do the characters think about the Man in Black, what are we supposed to think about the Man in Black, what do we know, what do we not know, what is hinted at, what has changed over time, what is contradicted, and all of that. And so it's a fun listen if you're into that kind of thing. There are spoilers for the series here, so if you are not finished reading all 8 books, really, of the Dark Tower series, turn this off, because we're going to spoil the whole thing in just a few moments. If you're still here, thanks for tuning in. We're so glad to have you. You're our people. You love this series as much as we do, and picking it apart with a fine-tooth comb, which is what we're about to do with book number 7, The Dark Tower. Ash is with me again, thank goodness, because she's so smart and remembers the things that I forget. How are you doing today, Ash?
I am doing well. I'm excited to dive into the last book of the series.
Me too. Now I wonder if you could give us your best shot at where we're at with this character in terms of who he is or who he is not.
Okay.
I'm catching you off guard, I know. Do the best, and then I'll try to fill in any gaps.
So the Man in Black is this wizard, half human, kind of, is what we're told, maybe a man, maybe not, but takes the shape of a man anyway, that is really well-versed in glamour magic, so he can change his face, his voice, his everything to appear to be different to different people. He wears a lot of masks. We know that he is Walter, who was a member of Martin's entourage, which was Stephen Deschaines' court magician was Martin. The Man in Black is also Martin. We get a little bit of a contradiction there. Sometimes he's also Walter and sometimes he's only Martin or only Walter, but by the end of the series, King has sort of retconned that and they are the same person. We get the last name Odem for Walter. We get the last name Broadcloak for Martin. He is also the Covenant Man and went through the keyhole. He is John Farson, who is the rebellious leader that is in charge of basically destroying Gilead and sort of all of Inworld and Midworld. He's sort of what brings down all the baronies and starts this sort of apocalypse basically. Trying to remember who else we've got in there.
Flag.
Obviously. Oh my god. Yeah. So Randall Flagg, who is, of course, the main villain in The Stand. Also Richard Fannin is another RF. Basically any characters of King that have the initials RF or MB are said to most likely be him. But we do know Flagg and Fannin for sure. We've got also, Flagg is the walking dude in The Stand.
Marilyn. Maybe. Probably not.
A little, sometimes.
Maybe. Probably not. He started out perhaps as Marilyn, like you said, and then by the end we're saying, oh, that's a different guy.
Yeah. I do think he's a different guy. I do think maybe he might have claimed it a few times for funsies, but in general, there was another Marilyn that was his own separate guy. So we've got A lot of names and faces. I'm probably missing a few. If you watch the other previous videos, we definitely go through like all of them in detail. Ageless Stranger is another title of his. And yeah, I think that's about where we land.
Yeah,
At the end of the last episode we did with the end of Song of Susanna, and I think that's about where we are at the beginning of this last book.
that was awesome. I could not have done better. And I think out of every character, out of every also known as other figure that we are wondering about, I think John Farson is the most controversial in
Yes.
terms of, is Walter or is he not Farson? And we've gone through so many kind of vague statements about this, contradictory information, characters saying one thing, Stephen King kind of hinting at another. That's the one to me that's the muddiest out of
Yes,
all of these.
I agree. And I do, again, we don't necessarily have the textual like certainty within the series. But it is at least hinted at by some of the characters that they either think he is the same or hinted at by King that he may have assumed that role at some point. So it's definitely a little bit muddy in that regard for sure, but the other ones are pretty solid, I would say.
I would say so too. And we see that reflected in the characters as well. We've been pulling out what they think about this man. And in the beginning, a lot of confusion. But by the last book, they were pretty certain that he was Flag, that Walter and
Yes.
Flag were the same person. And even Martin was the same person. So giving us that solidity,
Mhm.
which is nice and certainty, because for Farson, we really don't get that. Although today we're going to get another clue about Farson, which I think is pretty telling in one way or another. And then King's going to shred that to pieces. So
Mhm.
it's such fun. We're going to do it now. We're going to get started. We have a lot to cover today from this book. And moving back into the Dark Tower, or moving into the Dark Tower, the Man in Black is going to come back into the story in a very real way here. Because we've been hearing kind of about him a
Mhm.
lot in the last few books, but not having him in our own physical presence. And this is where he's going to find baby Mordred after the Katet has left the Dogan back through the door to Thunderclap, and little Mordred, I think, fell asleep, and Flag Walter finds him and is going to have this conversation with him. This is so interesting because we've never been able to kind of get into the Man in Black's mind before.
Yeah.
We've only had these external experiences of him, what he is saying or what people think of him. But because Mordred is able to read his mind, we get our first real picture of who this is and what he thinks and how he feels and who he really is. So this is very, what an interesting way for King to give us this information.
Mhm.
All right, so let's get started. So most of this is going to be the interaction, and unfortunately the last interaction that Randall Flagg, Walter, is going to have with anyone in the series. And I'll start. This is where Flagg comes upon Mordred in the the ARC 16 experimental station. I can't remember the name, wherever
Mhm.
that is. Mordred saw a man in blue jeans and a hooded parka standing on the gray tiles of the control center. His gunna, nothing more than a beat-up duffel bag, lay at his feet. There were 2 patches on the jacket. One read, U.S. Army, and showed a bird. The eagle bird, not the hoo-hoo bird. The other patch was a name, Randall Flagg. So what do you think about how he's showing up to Mordred?
Well, I mean, I feel like the blue jeans are for sure like he likes to dress like a gunslinger sometimes. That's fun for him, especially when he is in his Randall Flagg persona. I find the parka interesting, but the hood makes sense because he usually is wearing a hood when he shows up as the Man in Black. Obviously the patch with Randall Flagg makes sense. U.S. Army is interesting, and I do wonder if that is related to Farson and or the JFK thing that we are gonna dive into in another video. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that stands out when we do with a fine tooth comb. Like, King put badges, stickers on this jacket for us to look at too.
Mm-hmm.
And to say it's U.S. Army, it also made me think immediately of The Stand and how that was an Army operation with the
Yeah.
release of the Captain Trips virus.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then, like, where did he get the name tag? Where did that
Right.
come from? Because this is a U.S. Army issued jacket, but
Mm-hmm.
did he make it himself? Like, where did
Right.
that come from? And then, yes, the idea that there's some kind of government tie-in with John Farson, that's another episode, but there is a theory out there that Farson and JFK have something in common, perhaps are even the same person, and that Flagg kind of got his claws in there and changed the course of mid-world history.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get there. But so, yeah, I think all of that's very telling. And then just the fact, if we really zoom out and say he's showing up as Flagg here, he's
Yeah.
not appearing as Walter or Martin.
Nope.
That is somebody that baby Mordred, I mean, might have more in common with in the midworld lore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think that after the stand, for whatever reason, the Man in Black really, really likes the Randall Flagg persona. He really is stuck to that one because usually what happens is like, we see him in all these other worlds and things, and then when he dies, he like comes back in another world and is another, persona, usually with the same initials. But I find it interesting that he is using Flagg in this world as well as in the world of the Stand because that's not as common for him. Um, we do see, like, in Wizard and Glass, when they meet him in the Emerald Palace, he also calls himself Flagg, even though Roland refers to him as Martin specifically. So it is interesting that he is, for whatever reason, really drawn to this identity specifically.
Yeah, he likes the Flagg
Mm-hmm.
thing, and he'll talk about that. We'll get there. He's going to refer to himself as
That
that person
also
too.
that also makes me think, I mean, going back to the US Army thing, that maybe Flag is a tie-in to patriotism or nationalism in a way as well. Maybe, I don't know.
Hmm? Yeah, I mean that right there, we could just theorize about what is that,
Right?
why that jacket,
Yeah.
because he doesn't. When he shows up as Randall Flagg in The Stand, those of you who haven't read The Stand, this is our shared character. So I guess I should have said spoilers for The Stand, but it's a 50-year-old book or something. So we're just okay. No huge spoilers there, but that's not the patches that he has on his jean jacket.
Nope. I think a smiley face is one of them, but yeah,
Mhm.
these are not present.
These are not the same things on the jacket. So
Mm-mm.
that's what it is. Right. Okay. So do you want to? This is next. We're going to have Mordred being able to read his mind. If you want to read the next
Yeah.
part.
Okay, so he didn't want Mordred to know he was afraid. Perhaps he'd convinced himself he wasn't afraid, that he'd come here of his own free will. Maybe he had. It didn't matter to Mordred one way or the other. Nor did the man's plans, which jumbled and ran in his head like hot soup. Did the man really believe the thinking cap had closed off his thoughts? Mordred looked closer, pried deeper, and saw the answer was yes. Very convenient.
This is so fascinating because this man is afraid.
Yeah.
We have never had reason to think that before, but we know
No.
for sure. Or have we? Am I missing something? I don't think so.
I think the only thing that I can think of is potentially when he left at the end of Wizard and Glass when Roland fired Jake's gun,
That's
because
right.
that's the first time that we see him like fully just like disappear. But again, we're not seeing his point of view in that, so that's just extrapolation. Whereas this is like solid, like this is actually what he's thinking that we're getting for the first time.
So I think that is very telling of who this person is. And then he convinced himself he'd come here of his own free will. So, kind of this
Mm-hmm.
implication that he is not even acting of his own free will, that Ka
Yep.
has brought him here, that there are
Yep.
other forces at play, which is cool.
Yeah, and I do think that that sort of lends credence to the idea that he's maybe a little bit in over his head, specifically in this instance. I think that because he is used to not really having anyone on his level, like everyone is very easy for him to defeat most of the time. He's never really had to like contend with having like a real solid adversary.
I agree. And he thinks that this thinking cap is making him safe. He
Mm-hmm.
believes that.
Yes.
And Mordred is like, it's not, but he really thinks that it is. So
Yeah.
he's afraid, and he says, but I have an answer to that. And then this is, for those of you who don't know, who haven't read Black House, the thinking cap idea is a tie-in to that book. Those tie into the Dark Tower. I really liked Black House. The Talisman wasn't my favorite, but that is a series, and there is a third book coming out this October, which I think
Ooh.
will have more Dark
Yeah.
Tower tie-ins, the third of that trilogy. So definitely, I think it's a must-read for Tower junkies like ourselves. But when you hear about the thinking cap, and then he's going to make a reference later to whatever the place is in the state where he grabbed the cloak,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
also the tie-in. All right, anything else there before we move on?
I do think it's interesting that he is underestimating Mordred. Obviously, Mordred is a baby, so I think that that makes him think, you know, it's not too bad. But he is scared of him, and yet he does not believe that he has the power to be able to get past this, you know, thinking cap sort of protection barrier, which is, it's interesting that he is both scared and also overconfident at the same time. That's a very interesting dichotomy.
And it makes us wonder how many times he has shown up like that, because we've
Yeah.
seen that confident facade and persona. That's how he comes across. Was there fear underneath of that all along?
Yeah.
We'll never know, but this makes us consider that as an option.
Definitely.
All right, moving on. The newcomer found the steady blue glare of those eyes unsettling, unsettling, but tried not to show it. He wondered again if coming here had been the right thing to do. But he had tracked Mia's course ever since she had kindled. And why, if not for this? It was a dangerous game, agreed. But now there were only two creatures who could unlock the door at the foot of the tower before the tower fell. Which it would, and soon, because the writer had only days left to live in his world, and the final books of the tower, 3 of them, remained unwritten. Well, I pulled this out not so much because of who he is, but what he knows
Yeah.
and what he doesn't. So what jumps out at you when we listen to that?
I mean, obviously, the writer, he's referring to King, he's referring to the Dark Tower series in and of itself. You know, at this point in the series, we definitely are getting the more meta, like, the characters in the book know that there's books, know that they are characters in the book, and also know that that is a necessary part of, like, continuing their journey. We knew that Roland, you know, knows that at this point. Maybe not before that series. I can't remember exactly when they find that out, but we didn't know that the Man in Black knew that. We did not know that. I don't think we had any like evidence that he knew kind of what was going on in the Key World with King.
I don't think so either. But not only does he know this, he knows everything about it.
Yeah, he knows when the accident's supposed to happen. He knows that he's supposed to die. Um, that's big. You know, we do know that the man in black is very good at either finding or creating doors to other worlds. And we know that death is one of the types of doors that can lead you to another world. We see that with Jake. We see that with the man in black himself a lot. Um, so I don't know if it's relating to that. I don't know if it's relating to like the grapefruit. Um, we don't know how he knows this, but he apparently does.
He really knows it.
Yeah.
He knows. He quotes the page number of Wizard and Glass and says nothing has been written beyond page 675, I think, of Wizard and Glass, which I don't remember that many pages in that book, but I'm sure it's correct in one of the editions.
In the edition I have, it's almost 900 pages.
Oh gosh. Okay. I love that. I love it. Okay, but so that's huge. And
Yeah.
also just kind of a doubling down here on the doubt that is in this character. He is unsettled, very unsettled by this baby
Hmm.
and trying not to show it and wondering if he should even be here. So that
Yep.
kind of comes back to this idea, was this his free will? Is this just all caught like the wind? What is happening? And he doesn't really know, but he's pretending to act like
Yeah.
he does. And he does know some really big things and
Yeah.
not others.
It's very interesting. And again, we see that overconfidence with like he is certain that this accident not only is going to happen, but is going to happen the way that it was foretold to him via whatever he found it out by. He is assuming that with 100% confidence. And I do also find it interesting that that is what he thinks of while being unsettled by Mordred. That his first thought is that. So that's like putting in our minds, connecting the two somehow.
Yeah, that's a good pull from there. And just the idea that he feels very certain that the tower is going to fall, but he wants to get up there before it does.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this certainty, and he's almost right
Yeah.
about all of this as well, and has no idea that he's about to die.
No.
Or
Which
he
is,
has some kind of fear, but not enough
yeah.
to get him out of there.
Yeah. I do think, I don't know if it's just because he is so incredibly powerful in other aspects, if it's just that he never knows exactly how he's going to die. I mean, he's died multiple times. We see that. So maybe because of that, like maybe that's just a blind spot of his. But it is very, it's very interesting that like he knows when and how other people are going to die, but he has no
Yeah,
inkling for his own death.
it sucks. Well, empathy for him. That's a bad blind spot to have.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one.
Mhm. All right. So Walter next is going to sum up what is going on with Wizard and Glass as it's pertaining to what we're talking about. If you would like to read the next
Yeah.
excerpt.
Um, so he's in his head is says in the last book that was written in the Key World, Roland's quartet had banished Cy Randy Flagg from a dream palace on an interstate highway, a palace that had looked to Eddie, Susanna, and Jake like the castle of Oz, the great Green King. May it do you fine. They had, in fact, almost killed that bad old bum hug, Walter O'Dim, thereby providing what some would no doubt call a happy ending.
He refers to himself both as Flag and Walter O'Dim here.
Mm-hmm. And again, these are his thoughts. So it's interesting that they're so interchangeable to him.
Right. And he's shown up as Randall Flagg, but he's not saying they almost killed me and that bad old bum hug. They almost killed Cy Randy Flagg. So he's talking about himself even in the third person, not just
Mm-hmm.
mixing using two different characters, but referring to them in the third person, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I do wonder again because he has died in several worlds and come back. Maybe he's just views them as like, that's the mask he's wearing right now, and whatever happens to them, he's going to continue in another fashion somehow. Like that's where his line of reasoning is, maybe. But it is very interesting.
All right, continuing on, we get the idea of we start to get some background on this man, which is great because we don't know anything about him. We just have gotten little snippets perhaps of what came before, but now we get that fleshed out by King. Walter O'Dim had wandered long and under 100 names, but the tower had always been his goal. Like Roland, he wanted to climb it and see what lived at the top, if anything did. He had belonged to none of the cliques and cults and faiths and factions that had arisen in the confused years since the tower began to totter, although he wore their sigils when it suited him. His service to the Crimson King was a late thing, as was his service to John Farson, the good man who'd brought down Gilead, the last bastion of civilization, in a tide of blood and murder. Walter had done his own share of murder in those years, living a long and only quasi-mortal life. He had witnessed the end of what he had then believed to be Roland's last quartet at Jericho Hill. Witnessed it? That was a little over-modest by all the gods and fishes. Under the name of Rudin Filaro, he had fought with his face painted blue, had screamed and charged with the rest of the stinking barbarians, and had brought down Cuthbert Allgood himself with an arrow through the eye. Before we talk about all of the things in here that we need to talk about, I just want to pull out the beautiful alliteration. We forget sometimes that King is such a great writer. He's a good storyteller, but he is an amazing writer. The cliques and cults, the faiths and factions. I just love that so much. So just a little nod to the writing brilliance here. But okay, so we have a lot to talk about here that we're learning about this dude. So what jumps out to you first?
Well, I mean, we get under 100 names, so just proof that we aren't privy to all of the different masks and personas that he has worn, because again, he's like several thousand years old, and he's been doing this for a long time. We're getting maybe 10 or 15 of them. So that's interesting. It's interesting that the tower has always been his goal. We don't really know that before. Before we're like, he thrives on chaos. So we thought it was just maybe like, okay, like a destruction thing, but it sounds like he does have a goal beyond just the destruction, which is new information for us. Yeah.
And he's compared directly to Roland there, which I think is, we have had our theories about how closely related those two characters are. We have a whole episode about them being, the man in black being Roland's shadow self and the Jungian archetype of it all. And then we did an episode about the ageless stranger being Roland himself, or perhaps it's both of them because they share these characteristics. So here is King again, just saying they're the same. Again, here, right here. He's done that throughout the series if you were paying attention or if you were listening to us. So that's cool. We know that he will just play whatever role he needs to play as it suits him. We already knew that about him, but we're getting this definitive statement about it here. Yeah,
like we see, obviously he's talking about fighting under John Farson, which again is interesting because we have also been told that he may be John Farson. So again, this feels, because these are his thoughts, that feels more definitive that maybe they are separate people. However, we don't know if he might have like assumed that identity after death or anything like that. But for sure, he, you know, wore that sigil, that wide open eye, and fought along with everyone else at Jericho Hill, which we had gotten reference to, but we didn't see it ourselves. Like King never took us there, but in I want to say in Wizard and Glass when they all met at the Emerald Palace, he said something about seeing him there, seeing Roland there at the battle.
We do get the dream slash Todash in
Okay.
where Roland is remembering what happened at Jericho Hill, but I don't believe we get the answer to that question about I saw you, but you saw me
Yes.
too. Something kind of cryptic like that. That is, I
Yeah.
don't believe
I
is
don't.
answered in that
Yeah.
flashback.
I don't think that we get anything definitive like that. I do find it interesting also that like he's saying that, you know, he wore the different sigils or the different signs of these groups as they suited him, which of course is like the eye, but also like the weeping wound thing. In the last in Song of Susanna we see, I think, is it in Song or is it in Wolves? I don't remember. It's in one of those two that he's got that like weeping wound that is common for the other. Can you help me with the name of that one?
What?
The character that has the
Sayer?
Thayer, yeah. I was wanting
Yeah,
to say Sartor for some reason. I was like, that's not right. But then also, if we're thinking about what he's wearing right now, he's actively wearing a U.S. Army patch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting, like, apparently that's suiting him for whatever reason. That's something that he has gravitated towards wearing. And why, we don't really know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. It just makes me start having visions of him working in the U.S. Army lab where
Yeah.
this thing was released at the start of the stand. Like he was in there and he had his jacket with the name on it, the
Yeah.
U.S. Army doing everything, and he's the one that caused the problem in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. He'd be able to be there. It's very, very interesting.
Fun to think about.
Yeah.
Now, what do you make of his service to John Farson, the good man?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have been told that that's maybe the same person. Now we're saying it's not the same person. He's thinking like, hey, I served under this guy.
He sounds like he's making them two separate people here. And
How?
this is the man. This is him saying it.
Yeah.
So far we've only been hearing this from like Stephen Deschain and Roland and Stephen King and like these kinds of things. This is the man himself saying his service to the Crimson King was a late thing, as well as his service to John Farson. Or I guess it's King, but through the lens of we're really getting into the truth. This is what really happened with this guy.
Yeah.
That feels like two separate people again to me.
Yeah.
Dang it.
But it could also be tricky language in that if we're considering, okay, so this is a little bit tangential, but you know how there are like celebrities that also have their own brand, so like their own name is marked.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's sort of the same thing with Farson. Maybe Farson, he's talking about the service to the brand Farson as opposed to the service to a specific man. Mm-hmm. You know, again, it's one of those things that like it could still be read either way, I think. I'm not sure. It's really hard with this character because we don't see a lot of his inner world, and because he is so good at slipping away from anyone's grasp, including the reader, that it's like, I think it's supposed to be confusing on purpose. It's supposed to make us question everything.
I agree, 100%. we get him again. He just has casually thrown out these things to us, but he throws out another name. Like last time we were thrown Walter of Endworld, Walter
Mm-hmm.
of Allworld, and just these different names. And now he's tossing Rudin Filaro into the mix. So there's another RF for us at Jericho Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that killed
He's the one that
Cuthbert.
killed Cuthbert.
R.I.P. All right. Anything else in there? We have the quasi-mortal life, so kind of confirmation that this is not just a man, but we knew that.
Yeah.
We have. He didn't know that this was. It says what he believed to be Roland's last quartet, so he didn't have great knowledge of what is happening now at that point.
Which is another interesting blind spot for him as someone who does know a lot of the future and what it holds. It's interesting to see what things he is blind to, because it doesn't seem like he's blind to a lot.
And that makes me think about we know that the man in black is looping with Roland. He's aware of the cycle, as he points out in the Gunslinger.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also see at the end of this story, the series, that Roland coming back again for, I think, the 20th cycle, but that can be debated. But he's coming back again, and now he has the horn, and we're going to share more information about what's different this time that's related to our episode today. But could it be that because the quartet, his new quartet, is giving everybody a second chance, but especially Roland himself, to change the way that he is, to show up differently. So it could be that in past cycles, that was his last quartet. And that's why the man in black is like, I didn't know about these guys, because maybe this is the first time they've come through or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially with, Jake dying at the end of Gunslinger, and then coming back, we really see Roland show up in a very fatherly role that we don't see too much before then, when he rescues him from the house and pulls through in the wastelands. So it is quite possible that just because of Roland's training and his very tough exterior and being so separated from the world and from other people, it's very possible that he did not do that to get Jake. And if that's the case, then the quartet would not be complete.
That's right. And also the ideas of, I think that the quartet has been there before, because we see them having a lot of deja vu and just knowing things in the way that Roland does sometimes, that really point to they've done this loop before as well. So that doesn't super add up. But then that would say to us that the man in black, though he knows it's a cycle and he knows that Roland is cycling, he doesn't know that Eddie and Jake and Susanna are necessarily. Yeah. So just a lot to think about.
Yeah, if they are, maybe him not realizing their bond, maybe he doesn't, he doesn't see that they are a quartet before this cycle.
Right. Lots to think about there. Let's continue. We're still with Mordred and Walter, if you want to read the next excerpt to look at.
Yeah. King writes, from his gunna, the man who sometimes called himself Flag, on another level of the tower, he had brought an entire world to ruin under that name. Had taken peanut butter and crackers. He'd asked permission of his new den, and the baby, although bitterly hungry himself, had nodded regally. Now Walter sat cross-legged on the floor, eating rapidly, secure in his thinking cap, unaware there was an intruder inside, and all that he knew was being ransacked.
Okay, so just confirmation of Flag being in the stand and who this is, and we're really nailing that down. So that's just pretty obvious. I don't think there's too much to talk about on that point, just that it happens to be there. Anything you want to say about that point?
I do find it interesting that he is asking permission and referring to Mordred as his new den, just because that is leader, that is. It's interesting because we don't often see the man in black in a role of subservience. So him looking to Mordred as someone above him and asking permission to do things feels new. Because even when he is like serving under other people, he's very clearly in it for himself and doesn't actually care what they think. So this is sort of like the first time that we're really seeing like true subservience, I think.
I think so too. And he's, I don't know if it's conscious or an act that
Yeah.
he's become the child here. He's sitting
Mhm.
cross legged on the floor eating peanut butter
Peanut butter
crackers.
and crackers, yeah. Which is like,
That's not, he's not eating a roast beef sandwich. He's eating peanut butter crackers, sitting crisscross applesauce in
yeah.
front of this baby. So he's become definitely the inferior party here. And the question is, did he do that on purpose? It doesn't seem to point to that. Or has this just happened
Yeah.
unconsciously because Mordred is 100% running the show now, even though Flag is unaware?
Well, and also, I mean, we do get unaware that there was an intruder inside, so we don't know if Mordred is planting like unconscious thoughts to cause that reaction. Because again, he's totally unaware that Mordred can see
Mm-hmm.
exactly what he's thinking and just sort of like go through his memory files.
But it's a big flip from where they started
Very.
this scene.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Walter, or Randall Flagg, if that was what he was currently calling himself, had indeed come out of the floor. A neat trick, but of course he had once served Roland's father, Stephen, as Gilead's court magician, hadn't he? Under the name of Martin. A man of many faces and many neat tricks was Walter O'Dim, but never as clever as he seemed to think. Not by half. We have a lot of his names put into
Mm-hmm.
that little thought by Mordred, so Mordred just knows 100% what is going on with him.
Yep. And again, more confirmation that Walter and Martin are the same,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, in the beginning of the series was rocky, but is now pretty solid. Um, yeah, it's also interesting because we're seeing that he's not nearly as clever as he thinks because he has no idea that Mordred is just getting all this information out of him while he's sitting there eating his little snack. Um, which is also just crazy because I don't think we've ever seen him willingly put himself in a position of being able to be taken advantage of in any way, shape, or form.
No, no. And he didn't come in like that. So I think
Yeah,
even though we're not being told this explicitly, that this is all
there's
Mordred.
something happening with Mordred. I mean, especially because we know that Mordred is also very much a weird creature with a weird lineage. And so we don't know exactly the hierarchy of like demons in this world, but it seems like there's clearly things happening. And like I would say that Mordred is now taking the place for the Man in Black, that the Man in Black has taken for the reader for most of the series, in that we have no idea what Mordred is doing or thinking, but we know that
Mm-hmm.
he has some level of omniscience, at least when it comes to reading thoughts. So we don't know exactly what kind of magic he has, but he's clearly very powerful, in a way that the Man in Black is not conscious of.
Very, very true. And we'll see. Just, it's always, this is a different episode about what happens with King's villains, but we're led to believe, we have ideas about, we're scared of, we're just not sure how much power do they have, and we better be pretty afraid of them because we don't know what they're up to. And then they're just taken out by
Yeah.
ordinary means or simply or unaware, and that seems
Mhm.
to be the theme with it.
And that's also something that he sort of was inspired by Tolkien from. Tolkien is very into the idea of evil defeating itself. So like, you know, at the end of the Lord of the Rings series, where Gollum and the ring fall into Mordor, like that is something that only happened because of Gollum's own like overconfidence and blind spots himself. And so we do see that a lot of times in King's works, where evil is sort of defeated just by thinking it's better than it is, and like just falling prey to very mundane ends.
Agreed. All right, we're getting towards the end of Walter O'Dim here. We're starting here.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, he felt something very like an invisible hand to skim up his brow and push the hood back from his head. He'd always gone dressed in such fashion, when he could. In certain provinces to the south, even of Garland, he had been known as Walter Hodgie, the latter word meaning both dim and hood. But this particular lid, borrowed from a certain deserted house in the town of French Landing, Wisconsin, had done him no good at all, had it. So we get confirmation of Garland kind of linking him to
Eyes of the Dragon.
We knew that because he uses the same name of flag there too, but there's just more confirmation of that. And then this new name, another one, Walter Hodgie. I don't know how to say that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, we do kind of see that he does like hoods. Just like the man in black is generally like hooded and in this like black robe getup. And we see with Walter as well. And then I think there were some others that here and there had that. But it is interesting, especially because in a lot of religions, especially in the more like traditional sects of those religions. I am so sorry. Can you hear my dog?
That's okay. Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
In the traditional like sects of a lot of these religions, having your head covered is like very important. It is seen as both like your subservience to your god, but also as a protective measure in a lot of cases, because like hair is seen as sacred. So I do find it interesting that that is something that he seems to gravitate towards, given that he explicitly does not follow any cults or sects.
That's a good pull. That's a very kind of religious, cultish thing to do, to wear a hood all the time. And it's for himself.
Yeah, I do think also, I mean, there are, again, a lot of different religions that do this, but especially in like more pagan religions, it is often because your hair is sort of where like magic comes from, or how you're able to work magic, or that kind of thing. Of course, if someone has a little bit more knowledge in this area, please let us know in the comments. But that kind of it's like a protective covering for your own self. So I'm wondering if it's related to his glamour magic.
It's a good idea, and we know that King he pulls from the Bible all the time, including the story of Samson and the jawbone and this and that, and that's they cut his hair. Delilah cut his hair, which is where all his power was. So King has made direct reference to a character that has that thing going on. And maybe if he wore a hood, who knows? He would have been okay. But that's for sure could be something happening here.
Yeah.
But didn't help him this time. All right, you get to read the end of Walter.
Yeah, okay. So this is Mordred sort of finally getting rid of Flag. But you intended the same for me, didn't you? No, at least not immediately. But you did. Don't be a kidder, as Susanna would say. So now I do the one you call my white father a small favor. You may not have been his greatest enemy, Walter Padick, as you were called when you set out, all in the long ago. But you were his oldest, I grant, and now I take you out of his road. Walter did not realize he had held on to some dim hope of escape, even with the loathsome thing before him reared up, the eyes staring at him with dull avidity while the mouth drooled, until he heard for the first time in 1,000 years the name a boy from a farm in Delane had once answered to, Walter Padick. Walter, son of Sam the miller, in the Eastern barony. He who had run away at 13 had been raped in the ass by another wanderer a year later, and yet had somehow withstood the temptation to go crawling back home. Instead, he had moved on toward his destiny. Walter Padick. At the sound of that voice, the man who had sometimes called himself Martin, Richard Vannon, Rudin Falero, and Randall Flagg, among a great many others, gave over all hope except the hope of dying well.
Yeah, too bad on that one.
You're like, man, that sucks.
Not how things played out for him.
No.
So, yeah, the end of this character, and yet another name. And I think it's very fitting that in his final moments we get his true identity, which is the name Walter. That is his given birth name, Walter Padick. And we just wonder what happened to this kid he ran away at 13. That's very young. And what kind of life did he have? And we have a little bit of empathy for him here, saying he was just a kid.
Yeah. And like, he ran away and was so traumatized by whatever happened at home that him being assaulted by another man was not enough to make him go home. So we know whatever happened was not good. Yeah.
Yeah, poor Walter Padick. Let's see, anything else in here? He doesn't know. Even at the end, he doesn't know, and then he says, "Oh, I guess I'm gonna die, but I could still die well."
Yeah.
He's wrong about that too. So he's just wrong about all of this, which is too bad.
Yeah, and then we get, a farm in Delane as his birthplace, which is something we didn't know. I don't think we know too much about that place, but it's just, new information for the character. But yeah, I don't know. It's sad seeing him undone in such a way, because it does feel sort of anticlimactic, especially because he has been such a strong adversary in the series in general and in so many worlds. So it's interesting to see how easily he's undone here, which I think is the point.
And we could talk about how such a similar thing happens to Randall Flagg in The Stand, and how he's completely taken off guard by somebody that he thinks he knows, he thinks he has control over. It is exactly a mirror of that situation here with Mordred. So we shouldn't be too surprised when we say, what was that, Stephen King? He's written this same thing before.
Yeah, I don't think it's in a way that's like, oh, this is bad writing, but it is interesting to see such a powerful character so easily bested. And again, it is that overconfidence. And also, this is clearly a blind spot for him, like you said, with The Stand. We've seen that before. So we do know that this is maybe a pattern for how he ends up dying in different worlds. I do find it also interesting. He does seem like a little bit scared of this death, which is interesting because other deaths he's sort of welcomed because he knows he's coming back. So I wonder if he thinks maybe because, well, at this time he still thinks that King is about to die. So he might think that this is his last, this is the death. And of course we don't necessarily know that or not. I mean, he's going to come back in the next cycle. But we don't know if he's going to go to any other worlds beyond this. But at this point, he's convinced that King is about to die and the tower is about to fall, and he doesn't get to see it. So that's a really fucked up ending for him. But of course we'll see in the coda that he's right back where he needs to be. But as of now, this is as far as he gets on his journey to the tower.
Yeah, and it makes me I'm just kind of thinking about that blind spot and how it has to do with, he knows about what other people are doing, and a lot about what other people are doing and what they need to do and what they don't need to do, but he doesn't know about himself. He has not taken the time perhaps to do this inner work in a similar way, just because we've compared him to Roland all along, where Roland's so good at like looking out, well, not always, but like looking out,
Yeah.
assessing and figuring out what's what. And but he doesn't know himself well
No.
enough to fix the way that his fate is going to end. And again, in like this surprising way that he has no idea of what is coming
Yeah.
until he's in that moment itself.
Yeah. And I do think that that is the true like horror of it, is because these characters, especially the Man in Black, is seen as so, at least until this, seen as so almost all-knowing and
Mm-hmm.
extremely powerful. So it brings him down to our level, you know? It brings him down to being that little boy again. Um, just being a human kid that has no certainty. So yeah, it's an interesting, and I do think that that is one of the reasons that we do get his birth name, is just, you know, he's that farm boy again right before he dies.
And that's the thing that King does so well with his villains. For the most part, in
Yeah.
most of his stories, there's usually some degree of empathy where he kind of gets into our inner workings and says, you can feel for this person. I'm going to make you see from
Hmm.
this perspective, and you're going to feel a little bad for them, even though
Yeah.
they're the worst character
Yeah.
in the whole book. And he's good at that. And I feel like we haven't had that with this man yet, but
No.
here it is.
Yeah. This is very humanizing for him, um, and for us to see him that way. Which, yeah, is definitely a theme in a lot of King's works.
All right, that's the end of Walter. But we have one more reference to these characters, or to John Farson in particular, that I want to go over. So when Roland is confronting Connor Flaherty, a minion of the Crimson King, at the New York Fedic doorway beneath the Dixie Pig, Roland asks, may the din of the group step forward. Flaherty stepped forward, with his bleeding right hand clasped loosely around the butt of the gun that hung below his left armpit in a docker's clutch. That would be me, Roland of Stephen. You know my name, do you? Aye, I know your name by your face, and your face by your mouth. 'Tis the same as the mouth of your mother, who did suck John Farson with such glee, until he spewed his... Flaherty drew as he spoke, a bushwhacker's trick he'd no doubt practiced and used before to advantage. And although he was fast, and the forefinger of Roland's left hand still touched the side of his mouth when Flaherty's draw began, the gunslinger beat him easily. What in the hell is going on here with
Right?
Gabrielle and John Farson? What's this?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we know Gabrielle was under Martin's thrall. Um, Whether that was something that she originally entered into willingly, we know that that is not how it ended. Like, she was powerless in this relationship. Um, and in that way, she was helping Martin to bring down Gilead, sort of from the inside. And again, we don't necessarily know if she truly believed in Farson's message, or if this was all just part of Walter's charm. But regardless, we know that they had that relationship, but that was specifically with Martin. That was not with Farson. So this is new.
And making us say, oh, is that they're the same then? Because we've had even hints in other places in this book where Martin is Farson.
Yes.
And here, is he using these names interchangeably? Does this man know something that we don't? How could he know that?
Right.
Or did this actually happen? And just like you said, it's not totally out of the question, based on either she was super into the revolution or she was mind controlled into the revolution.
Yeah.
So we don't know, but I feel like that was a big kind of like out of left field where you should be, as the reader, going, wait, what?
Yeah, and
really?
We also don't we don't know if he means it literally or metaphorically here. We don't know if he's saying that as a vulgar expression of just following whatever Farson did and said,
Yeah.
or if this means that she was actively, having relations with Farson while the world was ending. We don't know, but it is very, like you said, out of left field because we are nearing the end of the series and this is brand new information to us and potentially to Roland, I don't think that
Mhm.
he really knew anything about this, or if he did, it was very buried, but we do see like Roland's hand touching the side of his mouth he after this is said, which feels like an interesting like your mouth is like your mother's kind of thing, like he was remembering. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know what he means by that. I don't know if it's. I mean, what do you think? I do think it could be read either way, but what is your reading on it? Do you prefer one or over the other?
It could also just be this man, like we're being told, is trying to get
Yeah,
Roland off guard.
yeah,
And so he's just saying, she's just talking
yeah,
bullshit now to
yeah.
make Roland angry. It could be that.
Yeah, and I do think that that does work to an extent because, again, Roland's shooting hand is off of his gun, touching his mouth because his mother's mouth was brought up. And if Roland
Mm-hmm.
was not like supernaturally good at gunslinging, this would have been
Mm-hmm.
his end.
So this guy, I don't think he knows.
Yeah,
This man is nothing. I don't think he know. I think he's talking smack, and he's
yeah,
just trying to get Roland distracted.
yeah,
So I don't think we're going to take, out of all that we've learned, we're not going to take Flaherty's word
yeah, for sure.
on it.
It
But
is
it
it is
does
an interesting note, though.
just adds a little more mud to the mud hole on
Mm-hmm.
John Farson is or is not the same as Walter, is the same as Martin.
Yeah.
And as our last note before we draw conclusions on the whole thing, we have Bev Vincent, who is an author of The Road to the Dark Tower, exploring Stephen King's magnum opus, and The Dark Tower Companion, a guide to Stephen King's epic fantasy. And I would highly recommend, if you are a Tower junkie, that you get one or both of those. Bev Vincent, you can tell, writing a book like that under Stephen King's blessing, knows this series
Yes.
inside and out, knows the characters, knows who's who, all of it's kind of in there. And because of his relationship with Stephen King, he was doing an interview with him and he asked Stephen King directly about this Flag Farson question. And he said, another character that seems to be one of Broadcloak Flag's aspects is Farson. And Stephen King said, Farson has nothing to do with Martin Broadcloak. I think there's a reference to the two of them actually being in contact in Wizard and Glass. That's. What do we make of that?
Obviously, King is the author, and he, what he says is probably what we should take. However, the man has written so much, and this work alone spanned like 30 years. So, I don't think that we can. I don't think it's impossible that he would misremember some things. Especially because we have seen, like, Martin was not just in connection to Farson. They were, if they were two separate people, they were actively working together. People knew that they were working together, which again could either be them actually working together or different people assuming these are two separate people when they're not. Regardless, there's more than just a little bit of contact between the two a couple of times. Like it is shown over and over again, like Martin is sort of the reason that Farson was able to conquer Gilead, which is the reason that the entire civilization fell. Um, so just with like the way that King is sort of like brushing this off makes me wonder if he is maybe misremembering some of the things he wrote. I don't know. What do you think?
It could be that. And because it is like, I think there's a reference somewhere. Like, no, dude. Like,
There's
he
more
wrote
than
a
that.
lot about these people, actually, and it's not just a casual mention of them.
Yeah.
We have a lot, and we've pulled it out in this series, the dozens of references here. So either he really was just like maybe super tired that day and just like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Or he's doing what he's done throughout the series,
Yeah.
is just like intentionally throwing us off the track, intentionally being vague about it. Oh no, they're not the same. Well, maybe they're together. I don't know. Like it could be that as well, like him being kind of trickstery about it, just to
Mm-hmm.
because he decided at the end of the day that's what was happening here, because he didn't really know. He
Yeah.
didn't have his final answer, and it's more fun to think we don't really know by the end
Yeah.
of the series what's going on. So who knows, but that was from the author's mouth
Mm-hmm.
himself. They are not the same person. And when we'll talk about the JFK theory, and that will kind of that'll align with King's idea, I think, a little more than some of the other theories.
Yeah.
But we've been talking for an hour, so I think it's time to wrap this episode up with our final thoughts. And to do that, we're going to go to the very beginning of the series, and then we're going to go to the very end of the series. And I want to take us all the way back to when we were reading The Gunslinger. And he says, the man in black says to Roland, "Why? I am nearly immortal as you are, Roland. For now, at least. I could have taken a face with which you would have been more familiar, but I elected to show you the one I was, born with." And that was from the revised Gunslinger. So just bringing us back to that idea that he is a man of many faces. He can pick and choose who he wants to show up as, when he wants to show up. He does it in a manipulative way and is using that to his advantage throughout the whole entire series, starting with his palaver with Roland. What are let's talk about any concluding thoughts we have. I think we kind of just did that, and then we'll move my low power. Hold on. Okay. My phone's going to die, so this is good timing. So let's talk about final thoughts, and then we'll kind of go to the end of the series with one big final thought for everyone that I missed several times I read this series.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, because this is a man of many faces, because he does have this power, and because he thrives on chaos and destruction and being a trickster, we can't know 100% with certainty who all he is, or at least who he is to different people, like within the series, and when he is those people. And that is definitely something that I think is kept vague on purpose.
Yeah, it's his brand to do that, and then we don't even know, because based on what we've seen of him in The Stand, he doesn't always remember even who he was. He has vague ideas of it and knows these initials are meaningful to him in some way. He really likes the Randall Flagg identity, but does he even remember that he died as that identity in The Stand in the same way that he was kind of got by more? We just don't know. So it's very purposely vague in all aspects. And then to say that we have Stephen King in his own story becoming a character in this story, and King talking about as Stephen King writing about Stephen King writing about the Dark Tower, and how this is a channeled work.
Yes.
And we have to think about how much of that is representative of the real Stephen King and where his ideas come from. And we know for certain that a lot of his ideas come from dreams and just kind of visions. And that's very channeled, in my opinion. That gets very mystical and metaphysical, where you can just dream up the plot of Misery. Like, not everybody can do that, my friend. And so if you're channeling, there's always this idea of men messing it up a little bit, and getting the details a little wrong when you're kind of pulling from divine inspiration. So I don't know. I think that's a fun thing to consider here as well.
Definitely. I agree. You know, we're like, they talk about it as like, even with like the Bible, that there are so many different interpretations because at the end of the day, if you're Christian, you know that God himself didn't write the Bible, and you know that men are fallible. So in that same way, King himself, as a character in this story, is fallible and is just doing his best to write down the things as they happened. And also, all of the characters outside of King are also very limited and don't know. Because a lot of these things that we're getting about the Man in Black is word of mouth, It's just what someone else experienced. We're not necessarily always seeing those things. Like, we never see Farson. We don't know what Farson looks like. We know that he's tall. We never see him. And that is something that is kept intentionally vague to sort of draw the reader to Farson, I think. And to just, like, obviously we want more. Obviously we want to dig into more. And I think that that's sort of where the Man in Black sits as well, is like, it's purposely left a little bit vague so that we can draw our own conclusions.
And that's the sign of a great storyteller. Yes. And a great story as well, where you're kind of leaning in, looking closer, being curious about somebody. That's investment and interest in the characters. And this is about the journey, not the destination. So if we're not invested, interested, curious, asking a lot of questions, trying to figure it out, then it's not that great a book, probably.
Yeah.
And here we have the biggest supervillain of all time, and we don't even know who he really is.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of answers by the end, but not 100% of them. And I think that is in keeping with the kind of mythos and just this kind of vague gleanings of who is this wizard, and we're just never really going to know, and we have to kind of make peace with that. And we're going to step out with the end of the series, where I've read the end. I've read the Dark Tower 7 several times. And it wasn't until I was working on this with you, Ash, that you brought something to my attention about everybody who's read the series. We get to the end and we're like, oh, the horn. The horn is the thing that makes this a different. We know there's hope because he has the horn this time around. There's also something about the Man in Black that I didn't pick up on. So I'm sure, maybe I'm just the dumbest one out of everybody, but I'm sure some other people missed this too. So do you want to read us? This is the end in the coda of the Dark Tower 7, what we hear about the Man in Black.
Yeah, so again, this is like the very last subsection of the coda. We see that Roland starts out the newest cycle knowing that the Man in Black is Walter. So the first reference, he says, he built his campfire over the bones of Walter's fire. And then a little bit later, he says, as for now, he would resume his journey. Somewhere ahead was the Dark Tower. Closer, however, much closer, was the man. Was he a man? Was he really? Who could perhaps tell him how to get there. Roland would catch him, and when he did, that man would talk. Aye, yes, Yar, tell it on the as you'd hear it in the valley. Walter would be caught, and Walter would talk. So he's got he's got information on him now, which is very, again, like that. This is a new thing. So I guess with each cycle, maybe Roland is also learning more about the Man in Black. It's interesting that he knows him as Walter, as his birth name, as opposed to just Martin. And yeah, I'm so curious about how that would manifest through the rest of the cycle with him starting out knowing this. Obviously we can't know, but it is very interesting. And then, we can end our little Man in Black series the way we started, the way that King started and ended, which is the very first and last sentence in the entire series. The Man in Black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
That was good. That was good. What a way to end, and what a revelation there. How many of you, tell us if you're still listening, how many of you noticed that when you read the coda, that he knows who this is? He spends the gunslinger not sure, not knowing his name. It's a big deal when they have their palaver. Who are you? oh, you're not Martin, you're Walter. Even in the revised Gunslinger, it's still this big mystery that's kind of gnawing at
Yeah.
Roland. Not this.
No. Now he knows. So that's also just, it's not just that the horn is different. It's also that Roland is bringing new things and knowing new things already. And what else does he know that we're not privy to? You know, what else has changed that is setting him up for success this time around?
Ah, so good. So good, so good. Thanks everybody for hanging in there for all 7 episodes of this series. It did take us that long to get through. We will be back with other bonus episodes about all kinds of things Dark Tower related, so stay tuned for that. We have a lot of ideas up our sleeves. If you have any ideas of things that you've been wondering about the series or think a bonus episode would be cool, or want to know the mystery of the thing in the Dark Tower, because there are a lot of those, we would love to help you and ponder it and philosophize over it. So just drop a comment, email realityremixradio@gmail.com. And I think that's it. Until we meet again, find friends. May you have long days and pleasant nights. Thanks for helping, Ash, and I'll see everybody soon.